Welcome to what is a Friday for me. I am cooking today from the Flavor Forks and Knives Cookbook, and I am making something called the London Curried Shepherd's Pie. So this is a play on both the English shepherd's pie as well as Indian curry, and so the end product looks very similar. If you know shepherd's pie, you know it's usually a meat dish, mashed potatoes on top, and what comes with it? Mashed potatoes, and then on the bottom you get a bit of meat and vegetables. So I've gotten this started in a number of ways because there's so many steps and I didn't want it to be too laborious for us. So I have 2 saute pans out, one for my family doing a double batch, one for some friends doing a single batch. And right away I'm going to add in some other things. So the recipe calls for 2 carrots. So I have done a bunch of carrots up ahead of time just because I got to looking at the recipe and felt like, wow, this is a lot. So, and then it's 6 ounces of green bean. So I've got 6 ounces, or roughly a cup, I believe she said. So I tried to separate my cut up vegetables. We'll see how it goes, if it's possible to make this work. I feel like the answer is it'll be close enough. But as I've been saying with you guys, what if you're too busy and you want to have a reasonable meal with lots of fresh vegetables and all that stuff, but you just don't have time to cut up vegetables? Well, you could buy a mixed vegetable bag of frozen veggies. You could buy cut green beans and crinkle cut carrots in the frozen section. You don't have to go and do all of this if that would be the barrier to you enjoying a good meal. It's really up to whatever your timing will allow. For instance, when I took a look at this recipe and it said to dice my carrot, I was like, haha, fat chance. So some of them are half moons and some of them are quarter moons and some of them are just circles. I did whatever I could do and still feel like a whole person. So let me just give these all a stir in the pan because they are sauteing with water and we don't want to get those to stick. Also, this is an older frying pan, but I didn't really want to pull out something that you can't see too well. So I got those pans preheated just a bit, and these are really, your goal here is to get them a little soft. This is going to bake in the oven, so it's not like all the cooking has to happen right here and now, but you're looking to get those a little soft. And you'll know from previous videos from me, I tend to keep my handles back as a safety precaution. In our house we have lots of little kids. Kids can run through unexpectedly even if you have them occupied otherwise, and you just don't want anybody getting hurt. I've known a few kids that have pulled hot things down from a stove. It's just terrifying. So now that we've done that, I want to show you another way to work with your garlic. So this is another one of those heavy garlic meals. 6 cloves of garlic per. So I had scrunched down on my garlic to release the papers and release all of them, and now I have all of this. And often you've seen me go through with a garlic press. Another way to mince, especially when you have so much garlic like this, is to go through, chop one way. You've already released some of the juices when you pressed down on them. So first I'm sort of making long slices with this rocking motion in the knife, and you can go as fast as you feel comfortable, really watching out for your fingers. And then kind of shift it and then go the other way. So if I went the long way, now I'm going the short way. And to just create lots and lots of little pieces with your garlic. So eventually I get that hand on top and I just go in many different directions with my knife until it's minced. So this here, again, because I'm making a triple batch, is roughly like almost 2 bulbs of garlic. It's like a bulb and 3/4. That's a lot of garlic. So you may not have that much of a need, and mincing it with a regular mincer may prove to be just fine. but I wanted to show you another way. This is a total possibility. It doesn't get quite as small. You certainly get to know how far you want to go, so the longer you sit here and do this, the smaller your pieces will get. But it's you know, if you're sick of it or you just didn't want to wash that one dish, like whatever, right? I think every day has its own level of like, what do I have available to me today? What's my energy level that is accessible to me today? And we want to be honest about that. So let me pull us back to these little things here. And so essentially, because I'm making a triple batch and I'm not counting out 6 at this point, I'm just going to divide this into thirds and say, okay, this batch is getting 1/3 and this batch is getting 2/3. And in that goes, added to the mix of everything going on. It's going to be super tasty. And of course, as we've talked about, again, you can get garlic in the frozen section. You can get it pre-peeled. There's so many ways that you can make this work for you. You can use garlic powder if you just don't have the energy. You're going to get a more potent flavor when you go fresh. That's why we go fresh. So let me turn this down a bit. It's starting to get really warm. Let's check on this one. Move that garlic, incorporate it. Garlic is going to cook relatively fast. It's part of the reason for why I don't worry too much about getting it in when everything else gets in. Carrots take a little longer, in my opinion, and green beans really don't need much cooking, so the fact that they're going in so early, it's kind of unnecessary, in my opinion. But my opinion, do what you will. Let me go ahead and add a little more water to this one. So when you're sauteing with water, do keep an eye on how much water has evaporated and add more as necessary if you start to get that stick on the bottom. Kind of keep track. It's really steaming your vegetables is what's happening. You're going to get the full flavor of the vegetable itself. You're not going to get that caramelized sensation. So that's the first step in all of this. And quite honestly, the first step was making the mashed potatoes. So I made mashed potatoes last night. The recipe called for russets. The russets, they were gross. So I have used a Yukon Gold. These were, I immersed them in water, boiled them, mashed them up with a little bit of salt and some nutritional yeast and some vegetable stock. So I have 2 big containers of that because you're supposed to have 3 pounds, I think it was, to go on top. It's quite a bit. Alright, so those, I feel really comfortable with how that looks. Just to give you a sense of it, right, that's getting a little bit flexible. I can rip it open with my hands. That kind of gives us a sense. So that was that. I also want to go ahead and add my curry powder. So curries come in different, I never buy one that says like hot because I've got all these little ones. Let me just tell you, they would revolt. But I love the smell of curry in my home. Oh my goodness. Like, you can even come back. Like, I might go to the bus stop and come back and you can just smell it. It's so fragrant. So we cook with a lot of curry. I think particularly too in a dish like this, which is going to have the mashed potatoes on top, curry is such a lovely flavor. This particular recipe also called for cayenne pepper, and I'm not using that because I just don't think that adding curry and cayenne is a great idea with the kids. But otherwise you would add a little bit of cayenne in here to spice it up even more. And that will mix around. And really you only need a half a minute or so with spices to get them to release their aromas and their flavors. So while the recipe said, oh, dump all this in at the same time, you could, you don't have to, and I didn't. So there is a little bit of flexibility in there, kind of knowing how things cook and making your own choices. But that gives all of that a nice color, whereas now The onions are no longer white. They've got that little yellow tinge to them. So pretty. Okay, that's done. Added the water in multiple times. Now we get to add in our red beans and our cauliflower. And so, given that we're going to do that, I also think this will need. So these are wide pans, which in part is going to be why the water evaporates. So again, I want to do 1/3 of my cauliflower in this one and 2/3 in this one. Cauliflower, in my opinion, is an unusual addition to this recipe, but it'll add some heft. And then the recipe calls for a can of red beans. It actually calls for kidney beans. I'm using just a plain red bean because, in my opinion, kidney beans have that thicker skin. And when I'm cooking for little people, I remember not enjoying a kidney bean as a child, so I'm subbing in an easier bean that still has that color that you might, if you're like, oh, I want the color of meat, you can understand why you'd use a kidney bean. Also, there's a lot of fleshiness to a kidney bean. So this is just a red bean that you can get in the store right next to the kidney beans. I'm going to add that in. Stir those around a bit. It looks so beautiful, doesn't it? Like, you just gotta love these vegetarian dishes and how textured and beautiful they are. Like, it can really add a lot of happiness to your life to have that much beauty in there. Okay, there is another piece that needs to happen here. Combining stock and flour. Before I do that, I still want a bit more. And honestly, continue to gauge your own water needs if you are sauteing. I'm looking at mine and saying, okay, I want that to continue to have enough liquid to soften, for example, my cauliflower. So I'm adding a little extra water. Also, I had started my onion and talked with you, right? So it wasn't all just boom, bada, bing. And that would have been true anyways. If I was cooking without you, I would probably cut up things as I go more than I'm doing now. So I would be taking longer and waiting as it is. So just kind of know yourself. I'm not one to do all the prep work ahead of time. I'm sort of do it as I go. Okay, so those can keep doing their thing. And while they do that, we are going to make a slurry that's going to thicken up the sauce and the juices that are going to go. So I believe it is 1 cup of vegetable broth. Let me make sure. Yes. So I'm going to go ahead and do 3 cups right in here. This is a 4-cup measuring cup. It's glass. I use it a lot. So if you're wondering about things to invest in, I feel like that's a pretty good one. This is a vegetable stock. I mentioned this earlier. This one's called Better Than Bouillon. It's kind of a thick paste, and it's really a teaspoon of this to a cup of water. I don't always measure that beautifully, but I'll give you a sense of it. So sometimes I just take a spatula in there and I just go for it. And I'm not really specific. I don't level it off. I kind of feel like it's vegetable stock. It's good. Now, you can make your own, and you really could make it very easily on the stove with some vegetables. I'm going to stick this in the microwave just to heat the water a little bit more so that that stock can incorporate a little bit. So you can make your own stock very easily, and it's actually really, really tasty. I just don't a lot of the times because I've already got so many dishes. I'm already doing so many things. It just doesn't feel like something I have the energy for. But every now and again I do, and I love it, and I wish I did it more, and all that jazz. So, if you have time, nothing wrong with making your own stock. It's not hard. You could even make it by the week if you wanted to, and then you could just, not have to store it. But a lot of people, if they're going to do that kind of thing, they do store it. They go ahead and either freeze some of it or they can it. Freezing tends to be something people love to do nowadays, but you've got to have the storage space. And so if you don't, or you just don't have the energy for any other reason, using a paste like that is a good way to go because it dissolves pretty easily in water. There's also cubes, but they don't dissolve well in water. You really have to get the water hot and move it around, and I just don't always have the patience for all that. So I'm going to use a fork just to kind of incorporate that vegetable stock into the water. Alternatively, I suppose you could just get your water good and hot. And then the amount of, it's calling for an oat flour or a whole wheat flour. I'm using just a gluten-free blend that I made myself. This is brown rice, white rice, and tapioca flour. You can also pick up blends, or honestly, you can, like oat flour, you can take a couple tablespoons of oats, put it in a food processor or a mini processor, and do it that way. It actually doesn't take anything to make oat flour, which is pretty remarkable. So, to make this slurry, you're just making sure that that flour gets incorporated. Otherwise, you're going to have chunks. So it takes a little bit of patience, not an extreme amount. I'm not an extremely patient person, so I actually like cooking better than baking for that reason. Baking, you really have to be specific, and I am just not into specifics. But this allows that flour to get incorporated. You see I'm making a little bit of a mess, but I've got a cutting board that's going to have to be washed under me, so that's fine too. Incorporate that flour as best you can. You get this, what they call a slurry. I'm going to give my veggies another turn just to make sure that those are continuing to cook evenly. The stuff on the top, we need to get that to the bottom so that it gets a little heated. This one is drying out a little. So why don't I go ahead and add in. I also leave my doors to my cupboards open a lot, which is really bad if you are suddenly in my kitchen to work with me. So this is 1 cup of this broth per batch. So I have 2 cups going into one, and I have 1 cup going into another. I have a little extra in case I need it. And now, all I'm going to do is move these around so that what's the term? The flour can get thick, and it's going to do it really fast because my vegetables are hot and my pan is hot. So I want to make sure I give both of these pans attention. Kind of up your game when you start using 2 pans. You're going to give both equal attention. I'm going to turn that one down because that burner I know gets a little hotter. It's this rapid boil burner. I'll tell you, people make up all kinds of things that are supposed to be so awesome. And it is awesome when you are boiling water to make pasta. But the vast majority of my life, I'm not boiling water to make pasta, and I need a second burner. So I have to work with that. But this is quickly thickening up. So once that is thick, I believe we're going to add a touch of lemon juice. Yes, and salt. Okay, you watch all this. I'm going to grab lemon juice. So you will find lemon juice gets added to a lot of recipes like this right at the end, and that they seem to do that in order to, so I'm going to give us just about a tablespoon of, a tablespoon, that would kill you, a teaspoon of salt per batch, because otherwise your vegetables are going to have all that curry flavor but not a lot of flavor in general. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm not going to measure my lemon juice. What I have learned is they are super conservative on their lemon juice amounts, what they tell you to add. And that brightening flavor makes a huge difference. So I dump. I don't over dump, right? That's not a half cup or anything. I'm going to turn that off so it doesn't keep cooking. I'm going to do the same thing here. Because once you've gotten to the lemon juice part, you're really working just to brighten up the flavor. And that cauliflower is getting softer. I can see its color and consistency changing to a more translucent look. Make sure that this one is in good shape. So it's a nice thick sauce. Yeah, you can see okay. And the good thing about something like this, like when I'm making a double batch, this is going to feed my family dinner and lunch. So the next day. So even though I've put in a little bit of time, I'm going to heat later, I'm going to heat tomorrow. There may even be a little bit for like Sunday dinner, you know, like it just depends how much we eat. And when you do it with lunch, right, I mix it with other stuff like a side of fruit maybe, or some bread or something like that. But usually dinner, this is like the main thing. We just put it on plates and serve it up. Okay, perfect. So this next part, I'm going to take us most of the way there, but not all of the way there, because I'm going to bake these later on. So they're going to bake at 400. And when they bake, they're going to bake for 30 to 40 minutes, and she suggests having a pan under it for anything that would spill over the side. So you want to keep that in mind. But here, she's calling for a 7 by 11. I am using, for the one that I'm giving to a friend, sort of a medium, smallish size catering tin, which if you wash these out, these can be recycled or used again. If you put them in the dishwasher, they will change colors, so you gotta do it by hand. And then I'm using a smaller size Pyrex glass. I'm using 2 of these for home. So, really, oh, just so you know too, I sprayed my pans with cooking oil because when they go into that oven, they're gonna bake onto the sides a little bit, which is gonna make your life a little bit more challenging. Also, like in terms of the saute pan, I could have used my Dutch oven, my heavy crescent, but then I would have had to have picked up my heavy crescent to try to get vegetables into another pan, and I am not that strong. I can, I don't want to. So, that's an easy dump into the pan. You see it fills about halfway. So pretty, oh my gosh. And I kind of don't think this will boil over, but use your best judgment, certainly. And then essentially, I have to do like a third of 2 of 2. So I'm going to make some estimates here to say like, okay, that's probably most of this one. And I'm getting all my hands up in there because I made my mashed potatoes yesterday. So they're a little, you know, they're going to be thicker. I'm going to need to break them up in order to make it work on top. But it saves me time today, and you really want to be thinking like, okay, if I want to eat this way, how can I make it real in my life? And the way that I can do that is by saying, okay, I have an extra 20 minutes here where I could peel potatoes, so I'll peel them now. But honestly, I may in the future make this without peeling the potatoes. I may just boil the potatoes. And her recipe calls for steaming. I don't have a steamer pot, so I'm not steaming. But you can. If you have a steamer pot and that feels like fun to you. I just boiled mine because it seems easier to me. So, from this point, I'm just going to flatten it out. And you probably would be able to use a spatula. It's just, again, I made these yesterday. And so I am doing what I can to get it on there and break it up a little so that it mimics the way it's supposed to mimic in the pan. And these will have that golden hue because they're Yukon Gold, not because I added a ton of butter. Although on Thanksgiving, you better believe I add a whole stick of butter to a whole pot of potatoes because it is Thanksgiving and we do it all the way. Okay, let me wash my hands before I put that up to you. But we are there, my friends. This is the bottom line. So here we have a beautiful pot in a very casserole-y form, everything in one dish. I love that when it comes to making meals for big groups of people. Something that can go, and then if you wanted to, you could add a salad, you could add rolls. I don't. I just like give them an extra portion of the actual food that's there. But if we were having guests, I would have salad and rolls. So, you know, that kind of a thing. And then, you know, you might have dessert or something like that, which kind of rounds out the meal. But that is the shepherd's pie. It will bake for 30 to 40 minutes, and it comes out steaming, piping hot, ready for you to serve an amazing, tasty, flavorful meal to your family or to your friends. So thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again very soon, I'm sure. Bye-bye.